What is good, everybody? Welcome back to another episode brought to you by the League FFB. More specifically, welcome back to another episode of Let's Talk Dynasty. Now, today, what we're going to be doing is one of my favorite shows that we've done over the last few years. Actually, it's just been a year, so I mean, come on, we haven't been doing it this long. But the reality is, we are going to be doing our team breakdowns and more specifically, the divisional breakdowns. Today, we're going to be starting with the AFC North. We will talk about that division specifically, the fantasy football players in that division, and how we project that to go moving forward. We'll talk a little bit more from a dynasty lens. We'll look at the underdog ADPs just to see how we expect these guys to perform for the 2024 season, but we'll also talk about the long-term value of these players and how we expect these teams to perform, one, on the NFL field, and how we expect these assets to perform as dynasty fantasy football assets moving forward. So that's a little bit of a long-winded intro. Hopefully you guys are still excited for today's video, but as I said, it is an episode of Let's Talk Dynasty. Now, it wouldn't be Let's Talk Dynasty unless we brought in my co-host. So without wasting any more time, let's hop right into this video. War, how you doing, man?
Hey, I'm doing good, man. I'm excited, man. The football season is getting closer and closer.
Hell yeah, dude. It feels like we are like right around the corner. I mean, we just had the Hall of Fame game just the other night. I mean, it got cut short because of the weather, but did you watch much of it or no?
I watched bits and pieces of it, but there was the third and fourth stringer, so it was just like whatever.
Yeah, I tuned in for a while, and then honestly, I'm not too mad that the weather cut that a little bit short because I was sitting there watching Brett Rippon throw touchdown passes to Colin Johnson, and I'm like, all right, none of these guys are going to be valuable for my dynasty rosters.
Yeah, no, absolutely not.
So, anyways, there's going to be better preseason football games here as we get to next weekend because we're going to have like the actual rookies. I saw that Jayden Daniels is going to be playing in the preseason. We'll get to see some Jayden Daniels. We'll actually get to see some of these guys rather than just like a meaningless Hall of Fame game. But as I mentioned, we are here today for the AFC divisional breakdown. Fantasy football, dynasty fantasy football, everything you need. Every player being drafted in the top 200 on Underdog, Outlook, all that good stuff. But let's just hop into it. I want to kind of start talking about these teams in order from the lowest projected win total to the highest projected win total in 2024. So this is probably going to upset some people, but we are going to be talking about the Pittsburgh Steelers. They do have the lowest projected win total in this division right now. Current win total is at 8.5 games. Now you look at what they did last year, a 10-7 team that goes to the wild card round of the NFL playoffs, struggled with a lot of quarterback play throughout the year. Obviously a change in offensive play caller in the middle of the year from Matt Canada. But going into 2024, they've made some changes to the roster, new free agent and trade additions in Russell Wilson and Justin Fields, new NFL draft additions with 4 of their first 5 picks being in the NFL draft on the offensive side of the football, 3 of those on the offensive line, and they drafted Roman Wilson out of Michigan in the 3rd round. So just want to talk briefly about this Steelers team and really talk about the win total because 8.5 wins, based on what they did last year, how you feeling about that? How you feeling about the additions?
I feel pretty good about the additions. I'm always going to ride with a Mike Tomlin coach team. I think they'll get more than 8.5 wins. I just trust them. I trust every team in that division for the most part. I think that they do have some designs for Justin Fields. I do think that he will eventually be their starting quarterback, and I do think that they will run that offense around his skill set, and I think that's going to benefit the team better. Going forward, he'll be able to utilize the weapons a little bit more in a running game, and I guess in a passing game. I think he'll be able to do a couple of things there, despite his shortcomings. But I feel pretty good about that projection. I can see them around 9 wins. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think 8.5. It's not a bad line. I mean, like we said, last year 10 wins for this team, and the quarterback play was abysmal. I mean, it was Kenny Pickett, it was Mason Rudolph, like a bunch of guys that really weren't. They're not starting caliber quarterbacks at the NFL level. As much as people like to talk trash about Russell Wilson, as much as people like to talk trash about Justin Fields, I think those guys are major upgrades to what they had in the quarterback room last year. And people dislike Arthur Smith mainly because he wasn't fun for our fantasy football teams. But Arthur Smith is a good offensive play caller. I think he's actually going to be pretty solid for the Pittsburgh Steelers. And why I think he's going to be so good is because what he does well is he excels in that run game. He does a lot of two tight end sets, two wide receivers outside. So obviously a big part of that is going to be Deontay Johnson no longer there. It's George Pickens and somebody. It's going to have to be somebody. We don't really know at this point. We assume Roman Wilson is the long-term answer there, but he's dealing with an injury at the moment. Pat Freiermuth is going to be a big part of this, but I think the running game with Najee Harris and Jaylen Warren, I think it could be one of the better run games in the NFL this year in Pittsburgh. And both of those guys are being valued pretty low in drafts right now.
Yeah, could definitely see a dynamic offense coming up there. People give their running back room flack because people are always low on Najee, but they're a little bit too low, or low on Jaylen Warren, but a little bit too low. So I mean, I think it's like we talked about in the past. Sometimes that pendulum, it just swings too far in the other direction. So I mean, I think both of those guys are fine. Both of those, it's okay to have either of those guys in your lineup. Roman Wilson, I did see he was a little bit banged up. Hopefully that's not something that's too serious. George Pickens, we spoke on him before. I need to see more out of George Pickens. I know, like, we have this expectation of Pittsburgh wide receivers where it's like, okay, take the most psychotic wide receiver in their room and they'll become a star. So, I mean, I just have to see more from him. But I think he does definitely have that upside that we're looking for. But let's see if this is the year we can actually see a better level of production from George Pickens. Because right now, in my personal opinion, the reputation out precedes the production.
Yeah, I agree. It's make or break time for George Pickens. I mean, the opportunity's right there on the table. So with the win total at 8.5, you go into the sports book right now. You have to play the bet. Place the bet. Are you going over or under the 8.5?
I'm going over.
Me too. I'm going over as well. Let's look at the players though in the ADP. These guys are currently being drafted. Keep in mind, this is underdog ADP, so it is single season ADP, but the reason why I want to show this to our viewers is because it gives you a real expectation as to where these guys' performance expectations are going to be this year. So Superflex ADP from Underdog, all of these players are in the top 200. You got George Pickens as the number one guy for the Steelers being coming off the board for the fantasy football realm. Wide receiver 25 at an ADP of 65. Then you have the questions at the quarterback position. Both QB 28 and QB 32, Russell Wilson and Justin Fields. Then you got the running back questions, Najee Harris and Jaylen Warren as running back 21 and 27. And then it's Pat Freiermuth and Roman Wilson rounding out that top 200 ADP. Just looking at this board, I think there's a few things we could talk about, but let's start it off with the quarterback competition because we both talked about the expectation that we have for George Pickens. We think George Pickens is going to be really good this year. But let's talk about this QB competition of Russell Wilson and Justin Fields because it seems like people aren't sure who to draft as the starting quarterback.
I think the reality is that both of them, Justin Fields has the better dynasty future if he can turn around and prove that he's a regular everyday starter. Russell Wilson, he's fine. He's fine. I personally would go with Fields because of his dynasty potential. He's young, and when you look at the numbers, look at where he actually ends up in his rankings season by season. It's not like this guy's like, even though I know his his quarterback 32, I don't think he's the 32nd best quarterback in the NFL. I think he's much higher than that, and his production in fantasy often reflects that. And the reality with Russell Wilson is that he didn't really have a crappy season last season. He got benched, but he did fine. So, I mean, if we're talking about quarterbacks here, I can see why there would be hesitation. It is a tough decision because you don't know who's starting. But if I had to pick one from a dynasty perspective, I'm picking Justin Fields.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like that makes a lot of sense. I mean, when we're talking from that dynasty lens, Fields is the guy that I want as well. I still believe now it's gotten a little bit clouded for me ever since Russell Wilson's been missing some time in camp because Russell Wilson's been dealing with an injury, and all of the reports so far that I'm seeing coming out of Steelers camp is that Justin Fields is killing it now that he has some opportunity as the starting guy on first team. So that's making things a little bit interesting for me as I try and project 2024 specifically, because beforehand I was talking a lot about how much I liked Russell Wilson as a value because I felt like there wasn't going to be a quarterback change if Russell Wilson was healthy, if the Pittsburgh Steelers were winning games, which we both kind of felt like that was going to happen. Now he's not healthy. Now it's opening the door for Fields. It's going to make this interesting. I don't know who I really am going to pick for 2024. I think I still slightly lean Russell Wilson in 2024 only, but long term, give me Justin Fields. I think he's the better guy. But if you are going to be making that bet this season, I think you probably got to try and figure out who you think the guy is because I'm looking at their schedule in the first 5 games of the year, which it's pretty much harder to project how that strength of schedule is going to be after the first 5 games. You just want to get these guys out on a good start for your fantasy football teams. But the Steelers, they have the 7th easiest schedule at the quarterback position, so it's going to be interesting. Whoever does come out as the starter has a good schedule. So it's going to mean good things for them. And yeah, man, it's very interesting. I think Dynasty, I'm warming more and more back up to Justin Fields, and it's making me nervous because it's feeling a lot like fool me once, shame on you, fool me twice, shame on me. And I don't want to be fooled twice by Justin Fields, but I think I might end up getting fooled twice.
Yeah, I'm a little bit nervous too because I've sold Fields mostly everywhere, and I've mostly sold him for peanuts. So I mean, I feel like that one could come back to bite me, especially if he's named the starter. I've always maintained this. I've always maintained that Mike Tomlin and his staff loved Justin Fields for a long time now. So it wouldn't be surprising to me for the first opportunity for Justin Fields to take Russell Wilson's job, he actually goes out and does it. So we'll have to see on that front.
Yeah. So let's move on to the running backs because there's also an equal, I guess, discourse between the two. You have Najee and Jaylen Warren both being pretty much back-to-back in ADP, very similar in ADP. Right now, if you had to pick one of these guys, Dynasty Fantasy Football and single season format, which direction are you going to be going for this Pittsburgh Steelers running back room?
This one is really tough because I truly feel like we are talking about 2 equal assets. I truly feel that way. I guess if I had to pick, I mean, aren't these guys even the same age? Like they're both like 26, like or something
I
like
think
that.
they're both in that 25 to 26 range. They're right there.
Yeah, so it's like I can't even lean one way or the other because of that. So because of that, I'm going to lean with Najee just because I've seen more of him do it more. I've seen more of him going out there and doing it. I'm not sure Jaylen Warren can handle a big workload the way Najee can. So I'm going to go with the devil I know and pick Najee Harris.
Yeah, I mean, look, it feels very much like in Dynasty, you have to flag stamp. You kind of have to, or I guess flag plant. You have to pick the guy that you believe is the better asset. Now, if I have to do that in Dynasty, I'm picking Najee Harris. I think Najee's the better player. I think he's more talented. He has the higher draft capital. Like you said, we've seen him give us, 1,000-yard season after 1,000-yard season after 1,000-yard season there in Pittsburgh. The offensive line, I just mentioned, they got 3 new offensive linemen in the NFL draft this year. They're going to be upgrading that. Najee profiles as the better goal line back. We've seen him have pass catching upside in this offense. He's the guy that I want. Now, obviously, he's going to be in a final year of his contract right now. And then maybe he's testing free agency. I don't know. Maybe that's better or worse for Najee. We'll cross that bridge when we get there. But I think if I have to pick in Dynasty one of the two, I'm going to take Najee, especially because the value is so similar. But in a single season format, your redraft league, your best ball league, whatever you play in, give me the guy who's going later in the draft. Like if one of them falls a round later or 2 rounds later than the other guy, just give me the guy who's a little bit later.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. You're getting a better asset later or equal asset later. So I mean, yeah, take advantage of that. Do it.
And then one guy that I want to talk about one more time. Oh, and I also should mention too, as we talk about the running backs, because it's very important, the starting schedule for the Pittsburgh running backs is the 4th easiest in football. So whoever it is, Najee or Warren, whoever you pick, they're going to have a very good start to the season. A lot of soft matchups for them. But I want to talk about Pat Freiermuth because he's a guy that I've been talking a lot about on the channel as of lately. I think he's a very sneaky tight end sleeper this year. I guess he's post-hype, but it's not even really hype, I feel like, with Freiermuth. But the reality is he's, 2022, he gave us a tight end 8 overall finish in fantasy football. Last year, he had a hamstring injury, was banged up. The offense was bad. He wasn't playing snaps until like week 14 because of the injury. Pretty much an entire lost season for Pat Freiermuth. And as I mentioned, I mean, let's go back and look at that ADP. You can get him now all the way at 144, the 144th player off the board. He's the tight end 13 there in that ADP. I mean, last time he was healthy, he was the tight end 8, and now he gets Arthur Smith, who loves to use those tight ends. He didn't use Kyle Pitts a ton, but remember, it was a 2 tight end set, and he was just feeding Jonnu Smith. He was feeding whatever. Like, he uses the tight end. And Pat Freiermuth has been giving rave reviews about the offense. He says he loves this offense. He's being featured in this offense. He probably is going to start the year as the number 2 receiving option on this offense. Is Pat Freiermuth the sleeper to you as well, or am I tripping?
I don't think you're tripping. I look at Pat Freiermuth in the same ilk that I look at Cole Kmet. He's like one of those guys where solid starter on your roster or great backup. Like, he's either a great number 2 guy behind an elite tight end, or he's a guy that you could put in your lineup while you have other studs at other positions. So, I mean, I definitely could see the value in a Pat Freiermuth. He's not a horrible tight end. And like you said, he's going to be getting targets because in that offense, it's really George Pickens and some guys that are trying to prove themselves.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, Freiermuth is the second most established receiving option in this offense. I just think when I like to target tight ends, and don't hear what I'm not saying, like, I don't think that Pat Freiermuth is a guy that you should be drafting as if he is a Evan Engram, David Njoku, one of these guys that are truly like receiving threats. But if you punt the position, maybe you don't have a strong tight end on your roster in a dynasty league and you're looking for somebody that you can get some good games out of throughout the course of the year and maybe a little bit more, Pat Freiermuth is a cheap asset that you can probably go get. And when I target the tight end, I want a guy that can be, we talk about it all the time on the show. You look for guys who can be the second receiving threat in the offense at worst. I want to be heavily involved as a tight end. That's what makes you valuable as a tight end. And this is that. This is that opportunity for Pat Freiermuth.
Yes, absolutely. And I don't think he's a bad asset to have it all.
Fair enough. All right, well, let's move on to the next team. The team we'll talk about here is going to be the Cleveland Browns. Now, they also have an 8.5 projected win total. But you look at last year for them, 11-6. They end up going to the wild card round in the NFL playoffs, led by Joe Flacco. They lose it, but in the offseason, they add Jerry Jeudy. NFL draft, they get Jamari Thrash. I don't think we're ecstatic about Jamari Thrash, but also you have to think about the coaching change that they've made there in Cleveland. They move on from offensive coordinator Alex Van Pelt. They go to former Buffalo Bills offensive coordinator Ken Dorsey. And Dorsey, he's kind of a guy who I think is going to open up the offense a little bit more in the passing game. He has a track record of being friendly for quarterbacks. He's coached Cam Newton during his 2015 MVP season. He also coached Josh Allen in Buffalo, and we know how good Josh Allen got under Ken Dorsey and Doug McDermott and all of those guys. Is it Doug McDermott, or did I just say a basketball player's name?
It's Sean McDermott.
Yeah, I think I just pulled out a basketball player's name right out of my ass.
Player.
Whatever. That shows, I was growing up on some Doug McDermott, whatever. Dude was a shooter. Yeah, that just came out, whatever. But yeah, he has a good track record, but 8.5 wins, that's kind of what we're looking at with the Jerry Jeudy addition. But other than Jerry Jeudy, like, no other additions on this offense. Nick Chubb recovering from the injury, Deshaun Watson trying to recover from the shoulder injury. What is the expectation here for Cleveland?
You know what? That's a tough division. And if I said Pittsburgh is going to get over 9 wins, I have to pick somebody in that division who's going to fall beneath expectations. And I think it's going to be the Browns. I actually like Deshaun Watson this year. I like a lot of things about the Browns. It's just that it's such a tough division, dude. It's such a tough division. And I just like the Ravens more. I like the Bengals more. Now, there is a world where the Bengals also fall short of expectation. But the Steelers, I just trust the organization more. I trust the coaching staff more. Nick Chubb has been the engine of that team. He's been the engine of that team, and he's coming back from a horrific injury for running back at his advanced age for running back. And so now you affect that engine. We got Watson, who, even though I think he's going to have a better season, hasn't proven that he can stay healthy recently. So I think that's the team that's going to take a step back.
Yeah, I mean, I look at how they performed last year. It was a very interesting season for the Cleveland Browns, and the fact that they were 11-6 was, I mean, you just look back at it and say, how the hell did this happen? Because Joe Flacco's winning games down the stretch. Amari Cooper's going off for 50 points in fantasy football championship weeks. Like it was just insane what happened down the stretch for the Browns, but they feel like a team that hasn't got better this offseason, even though the other teams around them in their division are getting better. Maybe Cincinnati, you could say, got a little bit worse because of the departure of Joe Mixon, but I don't know. It feels very tough. And like you said, this is an incredible division. This division is very good across the board. All four teams should be competitive. But if you have to pick the odd man out, I'm sorry, Cleveland, it feels like you. And 8.5 wins, do I think they're going to fall well short of those expectations? Probably not. But like, this is a team that I think very well could be like right in that 8 or 9 win mark. And if you fall one game down, you're talking about 8, 7 games. Like, now we're feeling a little bit different about this Browns team. Now, I think you're right when you talk about Nick Chubb being the engine of this. He's not. As much as I love Nick Chubb and I want Nick Chubb to be successful, at this point in his career with the injury history of last season and what that could look like moving forward, I mean, you look across the board at guys who have recovered at this age from an injury like this, and like, it's Adrian Peterson, ACL, like that's it. Like, that might be the only guy who's ever done it. And it makes me nervous for Chubb. I think at this point, like I said, as much as I like the guy, I think for dynasty purposes, for redraft, whatever it may be, fantasy in general, I'm probably betting against Nick Chubb. He's just not a guy that I'm going to put my chips on anymore. But I do think that there's a chance, and I know we've been saying this for, everybody in the community has been saying this for years, but I think there's a chance that we finally get a little bit of that bounce back from Deshaun. But it's got to be now, dude. If it's not now, yeah, if it's not now, we're done. I mean, it's going to be – that Browns contract could go down as one of the worst of all time if he doesn't do it this year.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's now or never for him. Like, I think he's one of the biggest now nevers of this upcoming season. We're far removed at this point from the devastating injury he had his last season for the Texans. We're further removed away from the scandal. Like, it's put up or shut up time now for Deshaun Watson.
Absolutely. So if I had to go to this, sports book, going to place my bet, I'm placing the under on Cleveland this year.
Same here, about 8 wins.
8 wins. That sounds about right. Let's look at the ADPs, though, because in the top 200, we have guys like Deshaun Watson at the top of the board, ADP of 65 coming off the board as QB 22. Then as an ADP of 77, you got Amari Cooper, wide receiver 31. ADP of 92, you get David Njoku, tight end 10. Then you got ADP of 106, Jerome Ford, the running back 37. Jerry Jeudy, Nick Chubb, Donta Foreman. All of these guys being drafted from that 120. Jerry Jeudy and Nick Chubb, that 120 to 145 range, but then Donta Foreman barely makes the cut, 199. Anything really in particular stick out here to you on the ADP? Anybody feel low? Anybody feel high? I mean, what's sticking out when you look at this board?
What's sticking out to me the most is, can you put it up for me one more time?
Yeah, I was trying to hold it for a second. There you go.
Let's see. Nick Chubb at 50, because, man, running back 50, ADP 144. Mm-hmm. Man, what if, okay, let's play what if.
Yeah.
What if Nick Chubb is the superhuman he's always been? You get Nick Chubb around 144. That's crazy. Like, don't get what I'm not saying. This Nick Chubb, yes, there's concern. His age, he's coming off of ACL. But there's still a possibility of Nick Chubb coming in and being Nick Chubb. That's not out of the realm of possibility. So if you can get Nick Chubb that late and he's putting up even anywhere close to his usual production, you could possibly have a steal right there.
Yeah.
Going forward, however, you don't want to have Nick Chubb as a dynasty asset. If you have Nick Chubb, just in the same breath, if he's having this amazing season, he's still Nick Chubb, the first thing I'm doing is trading him. Yep. I'm trading him to the guy that's trying to win right freaking now. And I'm getting something good. Like, you always want to target that guy who's just on the cusp, who's nervous that he doesn't have quite enough to win a championship. And this is if you're a rebuilding team. You're taking Nick Chubb. You're saying, hey, Nick Chubb having a pretty good season, isn't he? Your team's pretty good, but do you got enough? You should just give me that late first. Now, I don't think Andrew isn't going to give you that late first, but War is definitely going to ask you for that late first.
Yeah, my mind went actually to if I can get an early to mid second for Nick Chubb, I probably am taking it. Because I actually have Nick Chubb in one of the leagues we play in together. Suffered the injury, and ever since that injury happened, I've been like, well, I'm not going to sell him now. I mean, he's basically already at rock bottom, so I'm at least going to wait and see if he can, defy the odds and be a decent asset, because if I sell him now, I'm only getting like a third round pick, and I'd rather try and get that increase in value again than trade him for a third round pick. But I do think he's a guy that, like you said, he's coming off the board as running back 50. I'm not numb to the fact that, crazy stuff happens in fantasy and crazy stuff happens in the NFL. And Nick Chubb, if anybody is going to defy the odds, it's a guy who, like you said, is built like a tank, and that's Nick Chubb. Now, I just glanced at my underdog exposure to Nick Chubb right now because I wanted to see how much I've been drafting him. It's about 12%. 12% of drafts, I've been clicking draft on Nick Chubb, and it looks like a lot of the rosters that I've drafted him on are teams that I went heavy running back early, so he's being drafted as like my running back 4, running back 5 on the team. That feels like a good gamble when you have him later and you already have the running back depth, but I can't imagine wanting to have Nick Chubb as like my running back 2 or 3 on my roster because that feels too risky. So I agree, if anybody's going to have value, it'll be Nick Chubb, but I also kind of want to talk about Jerry Jeudy, because Jerry Jeudy's been disappointing in Denver for fantasy football for the most part. I don't even think probably most Broncos fans would tell you that Jerry Jeudy was a successful draft pick for them. But he comes here, he gets to play with Deshaun Watson. They've been looking to upgrade this wide receiver 2 for a long time, and they've taken shots on Elijah Moore's and Cedric Tillman's and all these other guys that they've done throughout the years. Jerry Jeudy's next in line. Do you think this is any different, or do you think that Jerry Jeudy's going to just continue to be what Jerry Jeudy has been? And how do you think that Jerry Jeudy will affect Amari Cooper, who is kind of a target hog down the year?
I do think he does enough to affect Amari Cooper being a target hog, but I still don't think he gives us that production that we thought he would give us coming out of college. Jerry Jeudy to me is a consistent 8 to 10 to 12 point guy. I don't think you're going to get those big monster games out of Jerry Jeudy. He's going to be there just to supplement Amari Cooper, David Njoku, and guys like that. Would have liked the Browns to invest, and I don't want to feel like I'm crapping on Jerry Jeudy too much, but would have liked for the Browns to invest in a more sure thing at wide receiver, because even with Amari Cooper is good, but I don't see Amari Cooper as like this game breaker either. So I don't think they have that guy on their team, and if they do, he's a relative unknown. I think that the one thing that the Browns have been missing for a long time, the one thing that they've been missing for Deshaun Watson is that Will Fuller type player. And I just don't think that guy is Jerry Jeudy. It's a completely different type of wide receiver, and and correct me if I'm wrong, does some of the same things Amari Cooper does.
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, they both play similar style. Both of these guys are that Bama wide receiver mold. But yeah, they're similar guys. I think they said that Judy's gonna play in the slot this year, which means that Tillman should be on the outside and then Cooper should be on the outside as the X. But it'll be interesting to see. I personally am okay taking a shot on Jeudy. You look at where he's going in drafts. I'll throw that back up on the screen because you see he's being drafted as wide receiver 60. That feels so far down the board.
It is.
And when it comes to like Jeudy versus Cooper, at their current cost, I have more Jeudy than I do Amari Cooper. I have about 6% Amari Cooper and about 20% Jerry Jeudy, but that's about a 30 spot ADP difference. So if they're somewhat similar, obviously if I have to pick them without the ADP being involved, I think Amari Cooper is the better wide receiver and the guy that I want. But when you get a 30 spot difference in wide receiver rank, and you get over almost a 50 spot ADP difference, a 5-round difference there, or a 4 to 5 round difference there in ADP, I'm okay taking a shot on Jerry Jeudy in the best balls and in the dynasties. And I think a lot of people have given up on Jerry Jeudy, which makes me, as a result, kind of feel like you can buy cheap.
Yeah. Yeah. He's definitely a guy that I would take a flyer on. I feel comfortable doing that. He's pretty late because not so much as Nick Chubb. I don't want to say the same exact thing, but could Jerry Jeudy possibly like defy odds and start to step up? I mean, yeah. Who has his quarterbacks been? He hasn't had a elite quarterback just yet.
Yep.
Now, I feel like Deshaun Watson in recent memory has not been an elite quarterback. But let's say that we get the old Deshaun Watson back to some respect. That would do wonders for Jerry Jeudy. I feel like this entire team is like a domino effect of what if. If Deshaun Watson returns to form, you're going to get probably the best season Jerry Jeudy has ever had. If Nick Chubb returns to form, you're getting a stud late in your draft. So I
Mm-hmm.
mean, the only guy who probably has similar outcomes no matter what happens is Amari Cooper and probably David Njoku. But
I'm I'm glad you bring up David Njoku because that's what I wanted to go to next because he is being drafted top 10 tight end. In Dynasty, I feel like his value is bounced pretty far back up to where he is pretty much being valued as a top 7 guy, top 8 guy in Dynasty. But I look at the opening schedule. You know that the Browns have the third toughest schedule at the tight end position to start the year. You know, we talk about the what ifs, like what if it's going to have to take Deshaun to bounce back? It's going to have to take Chubb to be healthy for the offense to look dynamic. It's going to have to take this, and this. And then you throw in a tough schedule and the little caveat of a majority of David Njoku's production last year came when Joe Flacco was on the football field and not Deshaun Watson.
right.
Does that worry you long-term for David Njoku in Dynasty? And do you feel like maybe David Njoku might be a sell in Dynasty circles?
I'm always going to say David Njoku is a sell because I've never been a David Njoku guy.
There's very few, but
But
the few who are, they're like cult fans.
yeah, I will find one of those cult fans and I would definitely take advantage of said cult fan and give them David Njoku for a hefty price. So yeah, his ADP is kind of high, man. I would definitely trade him. I feel like why wouldn't I get something for him and just plug in a guy like Pat Freiermuth in there that could go in there and give me some modest production.
You thinking what I'm thinking. I also just think like in a similar vein, like I'm just looking at Keep Trade Cut right now as we speak. Like the value between David Njoku and George Kittle is 300 points of value. And what 300 points in value is going to be from a like pick standpoint on this thing. And again, keep in mind, Keep Trade Cut is just, it's Keep Trade Cut, but that's like less than a 4th round pick. So if you can throw Njoku in like a 4th round pick and get George Kittle, the ceiling with a guy like George Kittle is way higher than what a David Njoku can give you. And their age is not crazy far off. I think Njoku's like 28-ish. Am I remembering that correctly? Let me look. Njoku's, yeah, he's 28.
He's in the neighborhood, yeah.
Yeah, he's 28 and Kittle's 30. So like you're getting 2 years. I don't know, man. It feels like I can't buy in on David Njoku at this price. And at the same price, they're the exact same priced assets. You have Njoku versus Jake Ferguson. And Jake Ferguson, we're talking about the second receiving option on his team. Why would you not just sell him and go to Jake Ferguson? And why would you not sell him and go to Freiermuth? I don't know. Those are the tear downs that I'm thinking about making. But maybe the Browns fans that are watching this will tell us that we're hating on David Njoku.
Much rather have George Kittle.
Much rather have. But let's move on.
Yeah.
We got 2 more teams. We got the Bengals here. We're going to talk about them. Very interesting year from Cincinnati because they were actually the worst team in this division, but they finished above 500, and that was without Joe Burrow and T. Higgins for a good chunk of the year. Finished as 9-8. As I mentioned, a lost season in 2023. Stars injured. They missed the playoffs. A lot of people had them as favorites to kind of be one of the best teams in the AFC, and you look at what they did this offseason, major free agent or trade additions from them are Zach Moss, Trenton Brown, the offensive tackle from the Patriots, Mike Gesicki coming over to play tight end. It seems like they're playing roulette with that tight end position there over the last couple of years. And in the NFL draft, you have Amarius Mims, Jermaine Burton, Eric all of these guys get added. And the loss of Joe Mixon. I think that's the biggest part of this offense conversation is the loss of Joe Mixon. Now, you look at this offense too, and not probably going to be that big of a talking point, but they do have a new offensive coordinator, former offensive coordinator Brian Callahan. He moves on to the Tennessee Titans. He's been working with them for a while now, but Dan Pitcher, who was the quarterback coach. He's been the quarterback coach for the Bengals since 2020. He's been promoted. But like I said, it's probably not a huge talking point because Zach Taylor, he's just kind of always been the play caller there. So there really shouldn't be any changes. Now, with that being said, you have a 10.5 projected win total. And we know that this is a team that no Joe Mixon, T. Higgins back on a franchise tag, Jamar Chase looking for money. He's not been at training camp. Joe Burrow, he's in his real Slim Shady era. And this is what's going on here in Cincinnati. How do we feel about the Bengals? Is 10.5? Do you feel like that's where it should be?
I feel like that's where it should be. All of everything you mentioned. Look, I'm for one not worried about the running back position. I'm just not worried about it. It's a replacement level position. One of those guys out of that backfield will become the new guy, and he'll probably put up similar production to Joe Mixon. Yes, I said it.
All right.
Everything hinges. Every single last thing hinges on the health of Joe Burrow. If Joe Burrow, you know what? And to another degree, whether or not Jamar Chase shows up.
He'll show up. He has to show up, right?
Yeah, I think so.
I
But you
hate
never
this.
know, man.
I hate this receiver. Like we're at a moment right now, and I get it because like every wide receiver at this point in time, and I'm sorry to cut you off, but we got to a point where it was like every wide receiver wants their new contract. Like we have guys like Tyreek Hill, who's like just signed one of the largest contracts over the last 2 years, and he's talking about, oh, well, now that the receiver market has changed, I need new money as well. Give me new money. I want new money. Restructure my contract. And then you have, Jefferson, or it was, what was it? At first it was Waddle becomes the highest paid, Devontae becomes the highest paid, then Amon-Ra becomes the highest paid, now Jefferson's the highest paid, then CD will be, Ayuk will be, Chase will be. Everybody wants to be the highest paid damn receiver, and they want their money now. It's like, can we just get to the point where you finish the rookie contract? Can we get to the end of the rookie contract before we start the holdout for the generational money? Can we just finish it first? You got guys that are starting to hold out like 2 years in advance to the end of the rookie contract.
Yeah. I definitely think that it's something that they should try to talk about during the next CBA, because it is getting a little bit out of hand. And I mean, the first thing they're probably going to do though is point out like, hey, well, the quarterbacks are doing it. That's the first thing they're going to point out. So I mean, but it's time to get the hands back in the hen house and get everything under control.
Am I wrong for saying like the longer you wait, the more money you're gonna get? Like, because it gives, if Jamar Chase sits and just waits for CD to sign the contract, and he waits for Ayuk to sign the contract, and he waits for the Jefferson contract to hit and all the other stuff, then all of a sudden he can say, well, look, I'm better than this guy, I'm better than this guy, I'm better than this guy. And I'm not saying he's better than the guys I just mentioned, but you get my point. But I'm better than these guys, and they're making X amount of dollars, and the money keeps going up and up. So now I can ask for even more money than what they're at. Like, you benefit from waiting. I don't know what the rush is to get the extension.
Well, I mean, it's just like you just said, though. Tyreek Hill, he just signed a huge contract, but now he's in a contract. He's like, hey, yeah, I'm gonna need some more money. So I mean, they're like, why should I wait when I can get it right now by complaining and holding out?
It's crazy, but let's get back to, you said it's gonna be. I took us on a whole total tangent, but we're talking about the win total at 10.5 games. And you said it's going to be contingent on if he shows up. So, 10.5, are we looking at this as high, low, appropriate? You got to go make the bet. What are we betting?
I'm taking it over. I think it's appropriate.
I kind of want to take the under. I kind of do. And I think the majority of the reason behind that is because I think 9-10 wins is where they could probably be at. I just don't see this being an 11 or a 12 win team. I guess maybe they could be. But the opening schedule for the quarterback is tough. The opening schedule for the tight end is tough. The opening schedule for the wide receiver is tough-ish. The easiest part of their schedule to open up at the running back position is their worst position on the team, and it's guys like Zach Moss and Chase Brown who aren't fantastic. Chase, I'm coming around a lot more on Chase Brown at the moment. I'm actually not very fond of the Zach Moss pick at the moment, but I don't know. 10.5 feels like a line I don't want to touch. But who knows?
I wouldn't bet it. Look. I had to answer the question. That don't mean I would bet that.
Fair enough. Fair enough. I think if I have, yeah, I mean, if I have to answer the question, my gut tells me it's lower, so I'm gonna stick with that. But let's look at the ADPs here because you got Joe Burrow, QB7 off the board, ADP of 9. Then you have Jamar Chase at 18, the wide receiver 3. You have ADP of 81, T. Higgins, wide receiver 32. 111, Zach Moss, the running back 23. 139, Chase Brown, the running back 38. And then you have Jermaine Burton cracking the top 200, 179 as wide receiver 72. Now, obviously, we talked about the departure of Joe Mixon. I didn't even mention the departure of Tyler Boyd, who has been a decent part of this offense for the last couple of seasons. When you look at this ADP set, it feels pretty clear cut and dry. You know, we view Joe Burrow, or at least people are drafting Joe Burrow as an elite quarterback. We're drafting Jamar Chase as an elite quarterback. There's a significant break showing that T. Higgins is the wide receiver 2, and then Jermaine Burton is the wide receiver 3 for fantasy football purposes is what we're drafting as. Now, there is a decent gap here between Moss and Brown. Most people are drafting Moss 15 spot above Chase Brown. That feels like the most interesting conversational piece here. How do you feel about the Brown and Moss debate here in Cincinnati?
That was it. I thought you were going to ask me what stands out. That's exactly where I was going to go. People forget, well, maybe they don't forget. I'm just making the assumption they forget that Zach Moss was a forgotten man in Buffalo. Like, he was left for dead in Buffalo. He was left. So then he has this little renaissance, and like now people are drafting him where they're drafting him. But it's like he has a very high chance of panning out to be a one-hit wonder. I'm riding with Chase Brown. Like, if I had the choice between drafting those two, I'd rather just skip over Zach Moss and wait later and take Chase Brown. I think he's the better dynasty asset, and I think the outcome is more likely that he ends up being a more productive player in the long run, even as early as this season, versus Zach Moss repeating what he was able to do last season.
I agree. I feel like over the last couple of weeks, maybe a week or two now, I've continued to make video and video and video. Chase Brown finds himself in all of these videos that I'm making. I don't know what's going on. Maybe I'm just in a little bit of a, maybe I'm in my Chase Brown era. Maybe that's what I'm doing right now. But I just made a video. It's coming out today. In fact, I think it comes out in 9 minutes at the time of this recording. It's going to be sleepers for fantasy football, and Chase Brown is on the list of sleepers for fantasy football. I mean, we talk about a guy that's being drafted in the 40 range that could be the starting running back of one of the best offenses in football. Have one of the best, has more pass catching upside than a guy like Zach Moss, has more burst than a guy like Zach Moss, has everything that you want, I guess, out of a running back other than like draft capital. But you look at the team, and there's not a lot of guys here either that really can compete. I think the debate is going to be Zach Moss versus Chase Brown, but as you mentioned, I'm just looking back at Zach Moss's career. I'm just going to point this out. 2020, 481 rushing yards, 48 in fantasy points per game. 2021, 345 rushing yards, 41st in fantasy points per game. 2022, 456 rushing yards, 62nd in fantasy points per game. Last year, his best year, fills in for an injured Jonathan Taylor. 794 rushing yards. That's almost twice as many as he's ever had in his career, but 28th in fantasy points per game. So the guy's best season ever, he didn't crack 1,000 yards. He didn't even crack the top 25 in fantasy points per game, but we're drafting him as a top 25 running back. I think that's where he was at, right? He's being drafted as 23. So, I mean, I don't know, man. It feels very sketchy. There's a small stretch of games here, and even if we break it down even further, you look at the game log last year, looking at this in week 3, week 2, week 3, week 5, week 6. He was a top 10 running back, and every week outside of that on the whole season, never cracked the top 25 again. So 4 games on the entire season, he was a running back 1. Never again. I don't know, man. It feels so risky. I mean, I get it if you want to buy in on Zach Moss because the opportunity is there, but the sample size is very, very small. And a small sample size like that in fantasy football feels dangerous.
Very dangerous. And I think he's trending. I wouldn't be surprised if he's a one-hit wonder.
Probably is. And honestly, I have 1 share of Zach Moss on my Dynasty squads, and I need to go sell that before this episode comes out immediately. I need to go sell that right now. Yeah, it's bad, man. It's bad. One more thing that I want to talk about on this team, we'll get out of here. Mike Gesicki doesn't crack the top 200. He's the next tight end in Cincinnati. There was a time where we loved Mike Gesicki in Miami. He's doing the gritty. We were talking about him. Then he went and did the Patriots time. Basically served time in prison in New England, and then he is now in Cincinnati. Mike Gesicki, any chance of a rebirth here, or we just don't care?
To quote an old WWE song, no chance, no chance in hell.
All
It's
right,
not
well,
happening. It's not
fair
happening.
enough.
Guy Gesicki is about to get all the smoke, pun intended, because he's going to get replaced by Eric All.
Yeah, yeah,
So
I'm
he can go ahead and do his little gritty on out of here.
fair enough. I thought maybe we'd hit a callback. If you've been watching the show for a long time, you know that there was a clip that we had of a Mike Gesicki quote. This time last year, probably when we were doing the team previews, it was you said it, I can't remember. It was something about digging a grave next to Juju Smith-Schuster, and there lies Mike Gesicki.
Was it last? Was it last year? I feel like it was way before then.
I don't know, but if you've been around the show, you know what I'm talking about. But we got one more team here. Let's talk about the Baltimore Ravens. Their win total currently 10.5 games. Same thing here as Cincinnati, but last year this was a 13-win team. They went 13-4. They made the AFC Championship game. They lose to Patrick Mahomes, Kansas City Chiefs. Major free agent addition for them, Derrick Henry. Derrick Henry comes. The king has arrived in Baltimore. He's going to be running in this backfield. And on the NFL draft side, the additions, they got Roger Rosengarten on the offensive line, Devontae Walker, Rasheen Ali. I don't know, man. How you feeling about this team? 10.5 wins going into 2024.
It's over. I think that's definitely going over, man. I feel pretty damn good about that. They will not win the Super Bowl, but they will hit their win total. They will not beat the Chiefs at any point during this season or the playoffs, but they will hit that win total. I feel good about them in season. They're the new Indianapolis Colts before Peyton Manning won a Super Bowl. They're the team that's always gonna have a great season, but then fizzle out in the playoffs.
Yeah, I agree, man. I mean, for the most part, I think this is a team that should be, when you think of like the top 5 teams that have a chance at winning a Super Bowl, Baltimore should probably fall into that top 5 teams of names you think about. Lamar Jackson, we obviously know the MVP year last year. You get Derrick Henry to this offense as well. Mark Andrews is going to be healthy this year. Remember, Mark Andrews wasn't even healthy, down the stretch for them last year, and they still won 13 games. This team feels like it's going to be so good. The defense is great. The offensive line is improving a little bit. It's still not great across the board, but it's improving. It's going to be so hard to defend Derrick Henry and Lamar Jackson in that RPO type of game. And then you're throwing the football to Mark Andrews in a year 2 Zay Flowers. 10.5 wins. If there's any team that I'm confident in smashing the over that we talked about today, I don't see why this team can't win another 13 games this year.
Yeah, I can't see why. There's literally nothing holding them back from doing so.
So if you had to pick a division winner, the division champion, the AFC North, is it Baltimore?
Yes.
I agree. Yeah. So, all right, well, let's look at the ADP here because there's a couple guys that I just mentioned. Lamar Jackson, he's being drafted as QB4 at an ADP of 4. You got Derrick Henry coming off the board as the running back 8 in fantasy football. ADP of 41. Mark Andrews, the tight end 4, ADP of 67. Zay Flowers, the wide receiver 27 with an ADP of 69. Then you got your boy Isaiah Likely, tight end 21, ADP of 181. And then post hype sleeper maybe that's getting some buzz in camp, Rashad Bateman, wide receiver 76 with an ADP of 196. So, I mean, we're looking at this. It's pretty clear cut and dry. You want Lamar. He's being drafted as a QB1. Henry's an RB1. Andrews is a tight end 1. Zay Flowers, Likely, and Bateman. These are kind of the guys that we kind of have to decipher here, I think, for the most part. But does that feel correct to you? You know, Lamar, Andrews, Henry, no-brainers. You're drafting them as tight end 1s, running back 1s, QB 1s?
I mean, no, I disagree.
Okay.
Clearly, if you're drafting Isaiah Likely in the 140 range, you're letting your league mates have opportunity to miss out on a future GOAT of the game. Isaiah Likely is a stud, man. The people are sleeping, but they will be awoken really soon. I think you can't go wrong with the first 3. The Zay Flowers is a curious case, man, because it's kind of like, what exactly is Zay Flowers going to be? Like, I honestly
I
feel
don't know.
like Zay could be anywhere from a wide receiver 1 on your dynasty teams to a wide receiver 3 on your dynasty teams. I would very much like some kind of statement season from Zay Flowers this upcoming season. Like, are you the true number one for the Baltimore Ravens? Like, can you put up number one numbers? Like, here's the thing, dude. Like, Mark Andrews is the number one target on that team. But that's only because there has not been a wide receiver to step up and take that from him.
Yep.
Like Lamar Jackson, okay, there was a time where I felt like Lamar Jackson's passing abilities lent him more to target the tight end because it was a safety blanket. But now I feel like Lamar is on a certain level where it's like you don't necessarily need to over rely on that safety blanket. The reason why I like Isaiah Likely so much is because he could kind of live in both of those worlds. The world of being a tight end and the world of being like playing as a wide receiver. He could live in both worlds. So, I mean, there's a range of outcomes where Isaiah Likely is the top target for Lamar Jackson, but we'll see. If that happens, I'm going to win a lot of games this upcoming season because I got a lot of shares of Isaiah Likely. But,
You've
Zay
been the
Flowers,
likely guy.
yeah. Zay Flowers got to step up this season. Rashad Bateman, we'll see. We were so high on Rashad Bateman coming out. I mean, I would love for it to be a scenario where he, performed at the level we thought he would, but gotta see it to believe it. And who else do we have here? We have Bateman
In the top
Likely.
200, that's about it. But I mean,
Yeah.
you have like guys that are going to be competing on the outside. Maybe Tez Walker, Nelson Aguilar, I think is still there. Like, not a lot of great options. Odell Beckham is left. In the running back room, like Keaton Mitchell's there for Dynasty, but he's recovering from an ACL. And Rasheen Ali was drafted in the 5th round. Maybe he's sneaky as like a taxi squad type of guy that you have. Watch him closely in the preseason. Justice Hill is still there. But yeah, I mean, the options, it's strong at the top, but it fades quickly because outside of Henry, Andrews, Lamar, Zay, like now you're taking it's dart throw territory and you got to pick your guys. And obviously you like Likely. I'm sure you'll be happy to hear on my underdog drafts right now when I'm looking at my exposure, my 4th highest drafted tight end is Isaiah Likely. I have about 15% of Isaiah Likely, and it's just because in the last round or two of a draft, you just click Likely, you click draft, and just see if Mark Andrews gets hurt, and you get some bonus weeks out of Likely there in a best ball format. But I don't know, man. I think that's really about it for the Ravens. I guess one thing that I want to talk about, too, from a dynasty lens, there's 2 things, really. And we'll go through this fairly quickly. I'm going to go over to Keep Trade Cut because I want to look at the value of where Lamar Jackson is currently being drafted. Now, you saw in a single season format, he's being drafted as the QB4. In Dynasty, he's QB4. He's going over guys like Jalen Hurts, Joe Burrow, Anthony Richardson, Caleb Williams, Jordan Love. He's right behind guys like CJ Stroud. Is Lamar Jackson being properly valued in the community? Or is Lamar Jackson, this is the tough question, or is he overvalued in the community? Do you prefer Jalen Hurts? Do you prefer Joe Burrow over Lamar Jackson?
I think Lamar Jackson is overvalued, but not by much.
He should be what, QB 5 or 6?
Yeah, somewhere around that range. Like, he shouldn't be any lower than 8.
Okay. 8's far. That's far. You put him below Anthony Richardson and Caleb?
No.
Okay, so he can't be lower than 6 for you.
Yeah. I would put him below Caleb. I would take Caleb, but
you got
that's another story for another day.
Navy and orange in your system though every day. So
yeah. But I don't think anybody else should. I wouldn't put him lower than 6, I guess.
I agree. I think more so for me, I probably am just gonna throw Jalen Hurts over him. But other than that, I view him and Joe Burrow fairly similar. But the other guy that I want to talk about was Derrick Henry because he's being drafted as the running back 8 in single season format. So we're viewing Derrick Henry as an elite tight end 1 in this Baltimore Ravens offense. But in Dynasty, he's being drafted as the running back 17. Obviously, a lot of that is because of the age. But if you have Derrick Henry on your roster, knowing how high the expectations are this year, are you trying to sell at running back 17 dynasty prices, or are you willing to hold and just see top 10 numbers come from Henry this year?
I sold him in one of our leagues, and I was pretty happy with the return.
What was that return, if you remember?
Oh, crap, I don't remember. I actually don't remember what the return was.
You remember what?
But as I talk through it, I'll find out. But just a greater idea on Derrick Henry is I think it's in the eye of the team that has Derrick Henry or the team that's receiving Derrick Henry. I think, and by the way, I traded
I'm
more
seeing
than
it.
Henry, but yeah.
I'm seeing it right now. It's actually a fairly large trade. It's Henry and Keaton Mitchell. So you trade the Baltimore Ravens backfield plus a 25-second plus Demario Douglas. You get Javonte Williams, Isaiah Likely, Jaleel McLaughlin, AJ Barner, and Jalen Polk.
I was satisfied with my return. And I
Yeah,
traded
it ain't
him
bad.
to a team that has similar assets on the team, like older players that are going to help him win now. Like, so that was kind of like the setup there. And it was after shopping Henry and not really getting much traction or getting what I want because obviously, since I'm War, I wanted a late first for Henry, and nobody was trying to give me that. So,
I think I think my best offer for you I gave you was what was it, an early second?
yeah, something like that. Yeah,
Yeah, I gave you an early second. I said I'll give you an early second. I ain't giving you the first.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you haggle with me over a couple spots. Yeah,
I think I gave you the exact same offer this offseason for Henry and Cooper because you had both at one point, right?
I had Cooper. Yeah, Cooper was though like right after the season ended.
Yeah, but I was trying to give you the same thing. I won't give you a first, but I'll give you a second, and that's it. And we didn't get a
Yeah,
deal done either way.
no. But yeah, am I trying to move Henry before? First of all, let me make this clear. I think Henry for 2 seasons, so this season and next season, I think Henry's going to be a stud. After that, I can't find any justification to me whatsoever. So if you want to move Henry now, that's fine. If you want to wait, that's fine because I do think he's going to be productive. The only thing that gives me hesitation on waiting is that you never know an injury is waiting right around the corner. You never
Yeah.
know. So if you have a good deal, if you have a decent deal on the table for Henry right now, and you're a team that's rebuilding or you don't think you're going to go very far, then move him now. But if you can afford to wait, let that value go up because I do think he's going to be a stud.
Yeah, I agree. I have Henry on a team that is going to be competitive. And I was exploring some down tiers, but I was being very picky about my down tier because I was trying to be very calculated with it. I wanted to down tier to a lesser value dynasty asset, but still get somewhat similar, contender value from him. And so like I was looking at very specific names. I was trying to down tier from Henry into a Joe Mixon, a down tier from Henry into a Alvin Kamara, down tier from Henry into maybe a James Conner, and get a guy who's still going to give you, top running back 2, running back 1 numbers this year, but you get a second round pick maybe thrown in on top, and you get to draft a young running back in next year's draft class. That was kind of the deal that I was trying to go. I couldn't get anybody to bite, but who knows? Maybe the first time we see Henry run for 3 touchdowns in this Ravens offense, somebody's going to lose their mind and want Derrick Henry on their roster. So we'll see. That's probably a move that I'll make, but I'm trying to down tier while staying competitive, which is it's interesting, but it's a move that I feel like will set you up long term for success. But anyways,
Yeah.
I agree. I think Henry's going to be a beast in Dynasty. If you're contending, I don't see a reason why you sell him. He's probably going to perform more than you'll ever get for him at this point. So we may be at the part of Derrick Henry's career where in a Dynasty league, he's going to be worth more on your rosters than he is in the trade room. And you might just have to have Henry on the roster till the wheels fall off. That just might be what happens with Henry.
Yeah.
So, all right, man. Well, that is it for the AFC North. So we just covered the Steelers, the Browns, the Bengals, and the Ravens. We think that the Baltimore Ravens are going to win this division again. We like the projected win totals on most of these teams. I think I was the only one who went with a lower on the Bengals, and then you and I both went with a lower on the Browns. But overall, probably going to be one of the most competitive divisions in football, one of the best divisions in football. Lots of good fantasy assets in here for our fantasy football teams for the most part. And on our next episode, just so everybody kind of has an idea of how these divisional breakdowns are going to happen moving forward, we are going to have the divisional breakdowns come out every Monday and every Thursday moving forward. So I have had those be the Dynasty video days over the last couple of weeks. We're just going to have them come out one on a Monday, one on a Thursday. So in this one, obviously we did the AFC North. The next video on Thursday will be the NFC North, and then we'll go on to the next, the South, the West, the East, all the other stuff. So we're right down to crunch time. We're getting into 5 weeks, 5 Sundays until we got football. You got 3 or 4 weeks. Yeah, 4 more weeks of divisional breakdowns, probably a My Guys episode, and then, God damn it, the season is here. So thank you guys for being here. If you guys have been here along the ride, we have a goal here on this channel. The goal is to hit 3,000 subscribers by week 1 of the NFL season. It's a lofty goal, but I think we can do it. I think if you guys are tuning in, you guys are listening, you guys are enjoying the content, you're hitting the subscribe button, hitting the like button, commenting, sharing, doing all that good stuff to help us grow and support us, we're going to do that very well. So appreciate you guys. In that, in that same breath, if you haven't done it today on this video, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, join the Discord, do all the good stuff. And War, where can they find you at?
You guys can find me over on Crimson Mask Pro Wrestling, where we talk about pro wrestling, WWE, AEW. Last night we had a huge SummerSlam, huge returns, huge betrayals, just a bunch of interesting stuff. And we're going to talk about it over on the Crimson Mask Pro Wrestling. Pro Wrestling with Natalie.
Hell yeah. I saw Logan Paul backflip off the rope, but it was pretty crazy. But I saw it. It looked cool. Anyways, that is it. That's all we have for you guys today. So go subscribe to Wars, subscribe to all the stuff, blah, 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 blah. If you're listening on Apple, Spotify, leave a review. Do all the good shit. Y'all know where to find us. We'll see you guys on the next one, though. Until then, peace out.